Good evening, everyone. My name is Samira Mohyeddin. I have been a journalist for 15 years, and for half of that time, I was a producer on Canada's national flagship morning program, The Current. I worked with some of the best in radio. I was also host and producer of CBC podcasts. I have a Master of Arts in Modern Middle Eastern History, and I'm a graduate of Genocide Studies from the Zorion Institute. I sit on the advisory board of Centennial College's Journalism School. I've won numerous journalism awards, including an Amnesty International Media Award and a National Canadian Online Publishing Award. The reason I'm giving you this background is not because I'm looking to get hired by any of you. I'm telling you all this because despite my education and accomplishments, I can still have a national columnist in this country refer to me as a, quote, so-called journalist. Tonight, I want to talk about gender-based violence in journalism, not as an abstract policy, not as an academic concept, but as something I have lived, witnessed, and carried in my body. Because the truth is, being a woman in journalism is one risk. Being a queer woman is another. Being a woman of color reporting on injustice is another still. And when those identities converge, the violence doesn't just add up, it compounds. I am someone who has spent much of my life trying to tell stories that sit in uncomfortable places, stories about power, about occupation, about genocide, and about people whose suffering is often ignored, minimized, or distorted. And because of that, I have paid a price. For the past 2 years, my journalism has primarily focused on Gaza and Israel's relentless onslaught there. Because of that focus, I have had the Israeli government publicly place me on a list of anti-Semitic generators and influencers, not for hate speech, not for incitement, but for criticizing state policy and advocating for reporting on its egregious violation of Palestinian human rights. When a provincial politician tweeted the name of my family's restaurant, it felt like a warning, a way of saying, we see where you live, we see where you work, we can reach right into your life. 3 weeks after that tweet, on the anniversary of October 7th, masked intruders broke in and ransacked the restaurant, smashing our windows, vandalizing, destroying. I stood inside that restaurant, looking at the damage, and understood in my bones what it meant to be made vulnerable for telling the truth. People would ask, do you think the attack was political? I would answer in return, what do you think happens when politicians and lobby groups publicly inflame hatred against a journalist, when they name you, target you, paint you as a threat? Violence is not always explicitly instructed. Sometimes it is simply permitted. From the moment I began working in media, I understood that the newsroom wasn't immune to the prejudices of the world outside it. Journalism likes to pretend it floats above society, observing it from a pristine distance. But the same misogyny, racism, homophobia, and xenophobia that shape our politics also shape our newsrooms, our audiences, and the way the public feels entitled to treat women who dare to use their voices. And if you report on subjects that make people feel uncomfortable, human rights abuses, war, colonial violence, that cost escalates. Gender-based violence against journalists isn't just about assault or physical harm, though some women endure that. It is also about what happens long before anyone raises a hand. It is the emails that begin with, "Listen, sweetheart." The online mobs that swell every time you publish something that challenges the dominant narrative. The slurs, gendered, racial, homophobic, used not to critique your work, but to destabilize your sense of self. The threats disguised as criticism, the fear that creeps into your daily life because someone has decided that your voice is too loud, too sharp, too inconvenient. This violence is meant to shrink us. It is meant to discipline us. It is meant to remind us of our place. Journalists are not just observers of violence. More and more, we are becoming targets, especially when we cover stories that people in power would rather we kept quiet about. When you report on inequality, you threaten the comfort of those who depend on it. When you name systemic injustice, you unsettle those who benefit from silence. And when you challenge the narratives that powerful institutions construct, political, religious, military, you become a problem. For women journalists, especially those of us writing from marginalized identities, the backlash isn't just professional. It becomes deeply personal. Our bodies, our families, our identities become fair game. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not unique. What is happening to me has happened to many journalists, especially women, especially queer women, especially journalists of color, and especially anyone who dares to report critically of Israeli state policy. Some are doxxed, some are threatened, some lose their jobs. Some don't report certain stories because the harassment is simply too much to bear. This is how censorship works in democracies, not necessarily through laws, but through fear, through intimidation campaigns, through the chilling effect that makes journalists think twice before speaking. When I speak about this harassment, people sometimes tell me to be careful. But here's the truth. Staying silent has never protected anyone. So why do I keep going? Because journalism matters, because the truth matters, because people living under occupation matter, because queer women deserve to speak without fear, because I refuse to let intimidation decide what stories get told. And because every time someone tries to silence me, they remind me of my own power and the impact that my voice is having. In the end, this is not a story about me. It is a story about the dangerous moment we are living in, a moment when journalists are targeted simply for doing their jobs. Because gender-based harassment doesn't just hurt individual women. It damages journalism itself. It distorts public discourse. It pushes women out of the field or into safer stories or into silence. It narrows the range of voices telling our collective story. I stand here tonight because I believe we can build something better, a media landscape that is courageous, a public culture that is critical, and a society that refuses to be ruled by fear. Thank you.